Welcome back to the fourth lecture on Lørn Masters in Quantum Computing with Dr. Mark Mattingley-Scott. And I got the name order right?
You're doing pretty well there. I mean...
Yeah. Yeah, I'll explain why I'm struggling, but off the record. So Mark, this fourth lecture we're going to do very briefly, and partly because I'm sure that we exhausted our audience, partly because the fourth lecture is a workshop, and it's usually, okay, so, we talked about AI, so what would that mean to me in my company, let's say Lørn? And with quantum computing, we are not there yet. But we can do this thought experiment. You said, call me back in 2028. So imagine we are in 2028 and I'm calling my pal Mark and asking him, so I heard you know a lot about quantum, and I'm wondering if I should, do something with quantum in my company. So I'm not doing pharma, I'm not doing materials, I'm not doing oil or batteries. I have a service company and we do educational platforms for businesses, and where could it play a role for me? What would you tell me?
So we take the grid of where quantum computing is going to be useful, and we lay it over your particular business process, your value chain, and that applies to you, but it's going to apply to everybody. So first question, is there anywhere in your business, in your particular value add, where materials and the properties of materials are being investigated or used? Probably not. Okay. No. So the second one is...
Pure service company.
Okay. So the second one is there anywhere where you're using machine learning, or where you're using deep learning or statistics, or looking at patterns? I would guess yes.
Very much so. And that probably means yes for just about every company. But let's say in my case, we are gathering data, not yet, but we are building a platform. And on that platform, we are going to be gathering data about people's learning preferences.
Mm-hmm.
And then we are going to be trying to use that data to optimize the effect of learning. So personalized learning paths, clustered groups of students with similar interests for, social learning, tagging of content for better structured, personalized universities, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So something along those lines.
Okay. So then the question I would ask is, if you were able to do any of those in real time. So typically things where today you may have a significant turnaround time. Where would it make sense, or where would it be of benefit to do something in real time? And real time means, as somebody is typing in on the keyboard, you're anticipating or predicting what that might mean, both for them as an individual and the group.
Okay, so again, I'm going to allow myself, some not poetic freedom, but like science fiction freedom. And you have to tell me, if I'm completely off. But one of my big dreams with this thing we're doing is we're now gathering a lot of content, and we are tagging it, for a topic, maybe for the perspective, whether it's a scientist or a founder or a politician who's talking. But I went to Oxford as a teacher, and I love the Oxford model where you have a mentor. It's this kind of Socratic style teaching. And so the real dream would be that any student on our platform would have a conversation with a platform which would serve it the right bits of knowledge from this extensive library that we are building. And for that, the system would have to be able to understand the different bits of every conversation and be able to pull out whatever is relevant. So, it would be the sum of all the knowledge that we managed to record now and served in just the right way. So something like that.
So I think there are two particular facets to that. The first one is the eternal dream, if you like, of truly universal AI. In other words, systems which can reason and think like humans do. I have my own very, very clear thoughts on that, which I won't go into right now, but suffice it to say, I don't think we're going to be at the point where machines can truly reason, even within 8 years. The other one is a case of scope and capability to churn data and to do pattern recognition on data, to label data. And that's certainly something where quantum computing almost certainly will have a significant impact. In other words, as knowledge is being created, to incorporate that knowledge actively. We see the beginnings of that in attempts to assign or apply the scientific method to business processes. I think that's going to accelerate. And in terms of just pure, where's the data, who's creating data, who is creating new knowledge, and how is that new knowledge being assimilated, structured, analyzed, categorized? Quantum computers will play I think a huge role in that. So bottom line is, at least on that side of things, quantum computing will impact your particular business. The third filter or sieve we need to apply is around things like Monte Carlo. In other words, things using randomness and uncertainty to predict, to find patterns, both in data and in structures. So the question there is, and in a learning environment, that's almost certainly also the case. Certainly around also around the idea of what's the raw information, what's the information you're disseminating, but maybe also in the area of what's new, what am I missing? If I'm operating a learning platform, I mean, there's stuff out there happening in the area I'm teaching about. But one thing I can guarantee, if you look historically, at the historical record, there is for sure stuff out there happening which you're not aware of, but will, in retrospect, prove to have been of key value. And doing scenario planning and trying things out and looking at, well, what am I missing? What might I be missing? Those kind of problems and solutions to those problems using things like Monte Carlo, exploring randomness in a very scalable way that will almost certainly also be further than it is today or possible. And I that's probably almost certainly something you'd be very, very interested in.
Mm. I'm thinking, so, I'm not interested, my primary problem is not maximizing revenue or business models, but it's maximizing learning and knowledge models. Mm-hmm. So one of the real hard problems I keep meeting is that, first of all, there are these psychological tools that try to guide you to what you should learn more about, but they're very abstract in a way. So I would love to have a really good recommendation engine for people to become more, let's say, cross-subject, get out of your echo chamber or your silo. I guess things that would be really good recommendation engines based on your learning data, optimizing your learning effectiveness, things like that could be then personalized efficiently.
Yeah, so I think the state of the technology today using classical computing, classical networking, classical databases and knowledge management, knowledge representation, machine learning, where we are today, in the next 6 to 7 years will make huge leaps in performance. What I think what quantum computing will bring will be the capability to examine forward-looking scenarios, to do what if. what if this happens? What if that happens? What would that mean? And I'm actually, as I sit here, I'm looking at the book on my bookshelf by Gausemeyer, Fink und Schlake. It's in German, called Scenario Management. So this was a science of economics invented many years ago. I think World War II it originally originated around scenario planning. So what might happen, what could happen, what was almost certainly not going to happen, with the objective of determining what are called key indicators. So what are the key predictors that something's likely to happen or something is not likely to happen? And what are the outliers? What are the extreme cases? How do I spot them early? There's a whole science behind that. It's been very theoretical. I think things like that might become more mainstream with the advent of quantum computing, because you can start to do what-if analysis. You can start to look at sensitivity analysis. You know, where are the things when I change them, they have a massive impact on the outcome. So, and in a learning environment, that's going to have a huge impact.
Both about what you need to learn, but also perhaps how job demands are going to change, our collective knowledge and where it has to evolve, etc.
And also very specifically, what's the best way to learn? So, again, a personal example, when I came to Germany 32 years ago, I spoke German. My German consisted of zwei Bier bitte. Again, it's a personal anecdote, but the fastest way to learn a language is, as they say, on the pillow. My girlfriend at the time, she spoke many, many languages, 5 or 6 languages. And she insisted in that the fastest way to learn a language was to learn like a baby. In other words, you just repeat the sounds you don't already know. You don't worry about vocabulary. You don't worry about syntax. You don't worry about any of that. You just make sure, as an English person, you make sure you can pronounce u, and e, because they don't exist in English. Now, looking back 32 years, that was exactly the right thing to do. Did I know that? No, I was headed for in Lingua and all the language schools. Other people, that may not work. Being able to detect, adapt, and use that in the most effective way to learn not just languages, but other things. That's a very, very interesting capability. And if you have the flexibility in a system that can detect and adapt on the fly, that would be, I think, very, very valuable, other than my appalling anecdote about how I learned German.
But adaptive systems that are truly adaptive to your kind of learning psychology, I think that's and that's one area where we're trying to experiment, because the systems that exist today are incredibly one-dimensional in the way that they think about pedagogics. Here's a video, and then there are 3 quiz multiple choices. Go ahead and do that for all the topics. There is a professor, he does a monologue, we're done. Rather than finding case-based discussions. For somebody, it's a short video. For somebody, it's a story that they listen to while they hike. And for somebody, it might actually be a reading text or, lots of images. So now with digital tools, this box is open, and there are many tools for super easy production or reproduction of the same piece of learning in many different formats. But we're not doing that. Schools are still putting out videos of lectures and calling it digitalized education.
Yeah,
so
please don't do this to me. I'm in Germany. This is digitale Wüste for the education system.
Okay.
I hope that the elections coming up, we're going to have a government who take digitalization seriously. I think in Norway and in the Nordics in general, because you have such huge distances, you are much further than Germany. certainly in the area of when I was active in the area of telemedicine, you're much, much further. But I understand, you're still, what's possible and what's actually done are two very different things.
Mark, I think that workshop-wise, I've exhausted my quantum computing chamber. I think I'm going to basically read up on some of the books that you recommended, and they might not be the qubit books, but things like secular cycles I'm going to head for now. And I'm going to look up your your TED Talk, wherever I find it. And I think we'll move from there, because I think looking for good examples of somebody already thinking about applying this is going to be the easiest way forward. At least for me, you've opened up a subject that I was really scared of, but knew that is really important. And I'm hoping it had the same effect on our listeners. Thank you so very much.
I hope so too. And thank you very, very much for having me, Silvija.
Pleasure talking to you, Mark. And
Likewise.
Thank you all for listening.